Over the holidays, one of y'all bought the quilt that I was making for the little lady, so I came in this morning to start on a second one. But that's okay, because I looked at their room and I decided to change the colors up a little bit. I really want to do mostly pinks, because that's what they have. So here we are, starting over. Pulled out a bunch of different light pink colors, and lots of them have white in them, but I really want light pink and white, something really, really soft. I cut them all into 5-inch squares, and then I started by sewing one pink square to one square that had more white on it, so I had a darker and a lighter color together. And after I had all my twos sewn together, then I started sewing two to each other, and I sewed the light end to the darker end, so it would be light, dark, light, dark. And then I cut those apart and I sewed fours together. So after I sewed the fours together, then I had rows of 8. So then I sewed my 8s together until I had 16s. Now I know I want my quilt to be 18 5-inch squares by 20 5-inch squares, because I want to add a border to it. So I have my rows sewn 16 blocks each. So I take them all in to lay them out, and that's when I realized I only have 16 blocks. I have 15 rows of 16 blocks, and I need it to be 18 by 20. So I need to add 4 rows to the end of each block, and I need to add 3 rows to the bottom or the top. I haven't really decided what side's what. I had already sewn them in 2s, and I had a big stack left over, and I was wondering why, but then I thought maybe my math just wasn't mathing, but evidently my math was right and I was just miscounting. So I finished sewing them, and I come back and lay the rest of them out. Now we're ready to try to put it together. So I pick up all of my stacks of 4, take those and sew them, and now we're ironing them to put them back down. Now I'm going to pick up the rest of my rows, sew those together. I'm only sewing it like this because of my math. If I had done my math correctly, I would be sewing all of my rows of 20 at one time, but it's okay. It's all the same. When I'm sewing the rows of a big quilt together, I try to do a few rows and lay it down, and then a few more rows and lay it down, and a few more rows and lay it down, and so on until I have the whole quilt sewn, and then I go back and sew my big pieces together. So I'm not dealing with all of that fabric the entire time I'm sewing it together. How do you decide how big to make a quilt? When I was first learning, I was taught to lay down a sheet the size of the quilt that you want to make. So if you're making a queen size, you'd lay down a queen size sheet, twin, king, full, whatever, and then make whatever blocks or style you're making, lay them on the sheet, and when your sheet is full, your quilt top's done. The little lady's bed is a queen, and I knew that I wanted my quilt to be approximately 90 inches by 100 inches. So after I've sewn all of the pieces together, then I'm going to measure it, and whatever it measures, I'm going to add to that to create the size that I want. I'm folding it in half and in half again. I just want to get an approximate measurement. I measure one side and it measures 80 inches. So then I fold in half and in half again and measure the other side, and it measures 88 inches. Now it's time to choose my perfect border fabrics. I'm going to do 2 borders. I'm going to do a wide border in this pretty floral and a narrow border in this light pink. Before I cut my fabric, let me introduce you to my Missouri Star Quilt Company rotary cutter. It's amazing, and it needs a new blade. So I'm going to change the blade on it, and y'all, the blades say the cutest things. This one says itching to be stitching. This rotary cutter comes as part of a set. It's a rotary cutter, a mat, 3 different sizes of scissors, and a seam ripper. There's a link in my bio straight to it, and y'all, it's incredible. It's everything you need to get started. Now we're ready to cut our fabric. So yes, that's a pop socket on my ruler, and it's incredible. I want this wide border to be 5 inches, so I'm measuring out 5 inches, and I'm placing some weight on my ruler with my left hand from the left side of my body and pushing away from me with my rotary cutter. That's going to give me nice clean edges. That, a sharp blade, and a good rotary cutter. Pretty light pink is going to be my narrow border, and I want it to be 2.5 inches. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm measuring out 2.5 inches with my ruler. I'm pressing down and away from me with my rotary cutter, and I'm holding my ruler down with the weight of my body on the left side. Now it's time to sew my border pieces together. If you're the quilt police, scroll on. This is not for you. I do not sew my pieces at a diagonal for my border or for my binding. If you want to, I want you to. I just don't do it because I don't like it and I don't want to do it. So after I've sewn my border pieces together, now it's time to add that to my quilt. I'm going to sew my small border first, all the way around all 4 sides, and then I'm going to sew my larger border on the very outside of my quilt. Then back to the ironing board to iron it one last time, and now it's ready to be quilted. But we'll leave that for another day. I'm going home. My name is Tammy. I'm your favorite sewing teacher, and I would love for you to come sew with me.